In this presentation, we are going to do a quick take and look at canals. While I do not consider canals to be either a river or a lake, canals do often connect the world's great rivers and lakes. In addition, with the construction of a canal, a regionally important river or lake can quickly rise in its greatness. Let's start with the definition. What is a canal? I'm going to rely on the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. To begin with, a canal is a human-made waterway. That means that someone has either redirected a portion of a river or has dug an entirely new channel to carry water. One of the primary purposes for constructing a canal is to allow ships to move from one body of water to another. Canals can also be used to move water from one place to another for irrigation, sewage removal, or other uses. Often, when canals are used for carrying water for irrigation or human consumption, they are called aqueducts. For our discussion, I'm going to consider that an agricultural or stormwater drainage system is not a canal system. While drainage systems are constructed waterways, they are not designed to move water from one body to another. While some ditches do drain wetlands into other rivers or lakes, I consider that land drainage, rather than seeking to connect two bodies of water. However, there are those who may argue with me. But my presentation, my definition. Before people started building canals, there was really only one way to get from one body of water to another. Well, actually, there were two ways. There was the short way. You found the shortest distance between the two bodies of water. Then you unloaded your cargo and carried it over the land barrier. If you were lucky, there would be a ship waiting in the other body of water and you could load yourself and your cargo onto the new ship and continue with your voyage. Or, if there was not likely to be a ship waiting for you, you would unload your cargo, carry that across the land barrier, return for your boat and carry that across, and then continue on your journey. Depending upon the amount of cargo and the length of the land barrier, this could take many trips and require a lot of time. For those areas in which there was a lot of cargo or people who were crossing the land barrier, there may have been other kinds of transport established to help cross that barrier. For example, prior to the building of the Panama Canal, there was a railroad that carried people and freight across the land barrier. However, this still required unloading and reloading freight and people at both ends of the barrier. Regardless of the crossing mechanism, it took significant time and effort. The second way to get around a land barrier was the long way. Using the previously mentioned Panama Canal example, while one could take the railroad across the land barrier, this was not reasonable for freight shipping or the moving of naval military vessels from the Atlantic to the Pacific. So instead of crossing the land barrier, one traveled around it. This generally involved considerably more distance and, depending upon the waters through which one was required to travel, more dangers. In some areas, these dangers were related to weather. In others, the dangers came from hostile people, such as pirates. Arrgh! The earliest known canal system in the world is the Grand Canal system in China, which was started in the 5th century BCE. The courses of the Grand Canal are seen here in blue. While this canal has been changed over time with some sections being abandoned, it currently extends 1,776 kilometers or 1,104 miles, and is still one of the longest canal systems in the world. During its peak, it was a major route for moving grain and other goods throughout China. For most of human history, the process of digging a canal was not particularly glorious. It involved men using hand tools to excavate a channel between the two bodies of water. It was a back-breaking labor and was often a major public works project. In many areas, the local population and the military were conscripted to do the work. As these are constructed waterways, they required a fair degree of engineering to ensure they were stable and would meet the intended needs. While it would seem most sensible to build a canal like a river channel, With fairly steep banks, canals were often constructed in areas with unsuitable soils and required very gently sloping banks to ensure the channel remained stable. In addition, there were needed features such as towpaths adjacent to the canal where horse or oxen towed the ships up and down the channel. One of the common challenges with digging a canal is that the soils are not adapted to the presence of a river. Even when these areas are reshaped, there is still the possibility of erosion. There are some canals where the slope of 10 feet of width for 1 foot of height, or 10 to 1, is still not enough to prevent erosion adjacent to the canal. Another problem with canals is that they can be outgrown by the ships that they were intended to facilitate. Many canals are undersized for the current super container ships, which requires two things. For a while, these new super ships have to return to the old route around the land barrier. Second, the canal is expanded over time to handle the larger ships, but this takes a lot of time and money. While the canals are being expanded, new bigger ships are built, creating a cycle of undersized canals trying to deal with ever larger ships. Many of these canals are critical transportation corridors that facilitate global trade. Every so often, something happens in a canal and a ship gets stuck, such as what happened in the Suez Canal in 2021 when a container ship got stuck, blocking transportation in both directions, snarling global shipping lines. As canals are used to cross land barriers, in many cases this will involve lifting the water over the barrier and then lowering it on the other side. For many canals, this involves a lock and dam system where a ship enters a lock, which is then filled with, or drained of, water to bring the ship to the desired exit level point. For canals that need to go over high land barriers, there can be many locks to lift ships up one side and then lowered down the other. Locks are generally only economically effective for canals that are used for transportation. One of the challenges with canals is that they connect two bodies of water that have not historically been connected. This means that the two bodies of water merge and allow for an easier connection where invasive species can freely move between the water. If one body of water is of lesser quality, this can also impair the higher water quality river or lake. Another challenge that canals pose is in relation to water quantity. In order to effectively function, a canal needs to draw enough water to fill the new channel and allow for transport of the desired size vessels. This means the canal either draws on water from the connecting water bodies or is fed by a different water body above the canal. In periods of drought, this can quickly reduce the quantity of water in any of the feeder water bodies as it is drawn to keep the canal functional. In some cases, canals can actually run dry. In addition to transportation, canals are often used to offset human impacts and allow for more growth that a region would normally be able to handle while staying within the confines of the natural ecosystem. For example, on the left is the Chicago River, whose course was reversed so that rather than draining into Lake Michigan, it drained into the Mississippi River Basin, with the intent of carrying Chicago's sewage away from the city's water intake. On the right, we have a canal that carries water through the desert, allowing the growth of communities far in excess of what the natural water system can handle. These canals are carrying water away from areas adapted to this quantity of water, which can be very harmful to the ecosystem. In addition, during periods of drought, there may not be enough natural capacity to support the down canal communities at their current population levels. As we began this presentation, I said that canals, while not being one of the world's great rivers, do serve to connect great rivers and lakes. They allow for movement of people and goods between basins and can greatly reduce travel times. However, this connection is not without costs. While canals can make moving people and goods easier, it also allows for the rapid movement of invasive species and pollution. As we discuss canals in the context of the world's great rivers and lakes, we should marvel at the role of human ingenuity, but remain mindful of the costs associated with our use of that ingenuity in changing the world to meet our needs and expectations.